Let's go through a few common errors in setting up your conditional statement. The most common error is actually adding a semicolon at the end of an if clause, meaning this. Remember, a statement is something to be evaluated. When your flow of control lands on this line of code, it reads from left to right all the way through until it sees the semicolon, which forces your flow of control to evaluate this right on the spot. But here's the problem. Because your conditional terminates here, rendering the rest of the statement not evaluated. This type of mistake, unfortunately, is not a compilation error. It is also not a runtime error. Syntactically, having a semicolon at the end of a conditional statement is valid. It is simply a logical error. If your intention is to do 1 plus 1, instead you write 1 plus 2. This type of statement, just like this, is not a compilation error. It is also not a runtime error, but a logical error. Your computer is not going to know or interfere with your logic. Your IDE is also not going to catch it. So you have to be really careful. This has been the source of common errors. Same thing with respect to loops. In the future, when you have for loop, for example, or while loop, and you add a semicolon at the end of it prior to engaging the rest of the statement, your entire for loop simply just exits right on the spot without going into the loops, rendering your repeated block of code bypassed. Let's look at some of the alternatives of your conditional statement and see if we can rewrite it differently. Let's examine what's on the left side. If a number is a multiple of 2, remember modulus 2 means checking to see if the remainder of a number divisible by 2. If the remainder is equals 0, this entire Boolean expression is going to be true. Then you set this Boolean variable, assuming your even is a Boolean variable somewhere. If the number is not even, then you'll set this even equals false. Let's look at this right-hand side here. You could simply have written Boolean even equals number mod 2 equals 0. Let's dissect this carefully. In the world of associativities and precedence, meaning the order of the evaluation, remember your assignment always has the lowest order in a list of all of the other operations. Modulus, similar to multiplications, divisions, etc., with the highest of the 3 variables you see here. So this will be considered to be evaluated number 1. This equals, which is the relational operator, will be considered number 2, whereas the assignment operator will be considered number 3 in the order of the evaluations. So now that we know modular has to be evaluated, if we have numbers mod 2, we compare the result of that remainder against 0. This will render this entire Boolean expressions involving number mod 2 equals 0 to be evaluated to either true or false. And the outcome of this on the right-hand side will then be assigned into this even value via this equal sign. So this is almost like a multiplex way of writing your code in a single line versus having 4 lines of code. Both are equivalent, although the right-hand side commands a more advanced understanding of your Java syntax than the left-hand side. There is no right or wrong. A lot of times you could opt for this one for better readability, and sometimes people prefers this, depending on the level of your comfort. Let's look at another examples next. In Java, it turns out that you could shorthand your Boolean expression from having 2 operands, left-hand side and right-hand side, plus the operators in the middle, into just one number. What's inside this conditional is a Boolean. So if even itself is a Boolean, you don't need to write this. Both are equivalent. Now, some compilers might give you warnings, but this is definitely valid and is not a compilation error by writing this. Even though this might be a little hard to understand, you'll get used to it. The best practice is that you would just spell out your intentions by writing out your Boolean expressions fully versus shortening it. The choice is yours. Let's summarize the whole thing regarding this conditional statement with a problem. This is a computing taxes based on 4 filing statuses, whether you're single, married filing separately, or a head of household. So this is a tax rate table for 2009 with respective brackets. If we were to represent this entire table given these conditions, you can use if and else to capture them. And this is the example. Depending on your status, whether this is 0, which is compute tax for single filer, or status equals 1, which is compute taxes for married file jointly, or status married file separately, or 3, head of household, or if the status is none of the above. You can use the entire if and else to capture this entire series of conditions. And notice that you might have several lines of code per condition, so you would want to use curly braces to create your own scope for each of these conditions. And remember, you have to use a relational operator, not equal sign, because equal sign itself is assignment. That's not relational. Relational evaluates to a true or false. And when you have a binary relational, it becomes an Boolean expression. So true or false, which means the status would have to be an integer variable or some sort of enumerations, which is beyond the scope of this discussion. Lastly, remember there is no semicolon here. Once you have a semicolon, you're exiting your entire conditional once that semicolon is reached at runtime. So don't forget that. You will have semicolon only after each statement. Let's say inside of these, inside of this, or this, but not against its if and else.